jumped out at me around what the Australian government's doing to better integrate climate and gender and empower women and girls and gender diverse people across a suite of policies, but certainly in the climate change space. So firstly, we had a new government come in about 18 months ago, and they've done a number of things in this space, gender and climate, some of which happen to come together, some of which intentionally come together. So a couple of quick examples. In our domestic budget processing process, the government's introduced gender impact assessments for all major new funding or policy or programs across the economy that the government brings in. So those have to get an impact assessment about what they mean for women and girls and gender diverse people before they make it to the cabinet room for discussion, and they'll have advice in that cabinet decision about what that means in terms of gender impacts. And of course, those of you that have been following climate progress in Australia over that time would know a lot of proposals that have gone to our cabinet have been about climate change. Around 40 billion worth of investments already committed in that 18 months in our own decarbonisation. So all of those major ones have a gender impact assessment that goes along with them. In terms of our international development policy, the government's also a few months ago released a new Australian international development policy. And in that, it includes a requirement that all ODA investments over $3 million must have a gender equality objective in them. And 80% of those ODA investments are required to demonstrate that they effectively address gender equality in their implementation. And again, lots of our ODA also is delivering climate projects on the ground in our developing country partner governments. So you can imagine that's bringing gender and climate objectives together through individual projects and investments. And then just finally, I guess one of the things that we like to do and have the opportunity this morning is hearing from others, hearing about what they're doing, what works, what the challenges are, and what they think we need to do more of to continue to advance this really important issue internationally. So we have a panel of very distinguished people here today to discuss this issue. I'll just do quick introductions of all 5 of our panellists, and then we'll get into some questions. I should probably start by introducing myself. I'm Kristin Tilley. I'm Australia's Climate Change Ambassador. On my left here, we have Her Excellency Mona Ainuu, who many of you will know is the Pacific Political Champion for Gender and Social Inclusion. Then we have Miss Ambassador Catherine Stewart, the Canadian Ambassador for Climate Change. Then moving to Ambassador Geeta Gupta, the 4th Ambassador at Large in the US for the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues in the US Department of State. And Joel, and apologies while I don't do a great job at pronouncing your surname, Jock, my apologies. Jock Geselschap, close enough, who heads the climate affairs of the Department of Foreign Affairs in the Dutch government. And then finally we have Elena Besting, who's Program Manager at UN ESCAP, the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, where she leads on UN ESCAP's work on closing the funding gap for women entrepreneurs, as well as a number of other issues. So with those introductions, and I'm sure you'll attest to the fact that we do have a very esteemed and knowledgeable panel here, I'm going to start with a broad question for the panel and ask you each to reflect, if you're willing, with a brief response. So the question is, what are some of the new approaches and innovative ways you've seen countries, governments, pursue to drive gender transformation actions across sector to strengthen that whole of community response? If we start with you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Christine. So anyway, apart from being a minister, I'm called Mother Earth because I'm Minister for Natural Resources. I am Minister for Environment, Meteorology, Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, and part climate change. So I guess I'm it for anywhere. But anyway, happy Gender Day to everyone, and I acknowledge the panel. I guess being here at COP, my first COP was last year, and this is the second one, as political champion for gender from the Pacific. There's a lot of progress in what we have been doing in the Pacific in regards to the gender item or topic of conversation as such. The recent revitalization of the Gender Equality Declaration by the Pacific leaders is certainly a mechanism that we have developed to allow us to move forward in our approach in different areas. But I guess on the home front, in regards to where we are, there still needs to be a lot to be done. I know there's quite a percentage of women parliamentarians, women leaders in the Pacific in current years, but we're not really seeing that at a higher level at decision making, and that's what I've been calling a lot on our leaders in the Pacific to ensure that we have revitalized the declaration, but we also need to action these ideas that we bring at that other level. So I'm very happy also to speak on my own experience as a woman decision maker. When I came into the government, as we all know in the Pacific, it's dominated by men. So I'm very happy to say that Niue has a balanced cabinet, although the numbers are small, but it's still balanced. So hopefully they will mean something. But in regards to policies, we have a lot of policies in place. In the Pacific, I think we've written a Bible of policies. Whether we action them rightly or correctly is something else. So coming to COP, I'm hoping that I will learn from other regions as to how to progress as such, and just hearing our voices. There are a lot. I'm sorry. Is that all right? I'm still.
Yeah, that's okay.
Typical politicians, and can't stop talking. But I promise I will stop very shortly. But it's just having others understand where we are. That when we have assistance from our side, I really wish to also acknowledge the great assistance from Australia to the region, especially to Niue as well. I work closely with a lot of our dignitaries from Australia, the diplomats from Australia, to push our, our development with the women and children as well, because that's something that is really important. We talk a lot about climate change, and just having to relate what we're doing to having within the climate change context is very difficult as well. The science language is something that we struggle to understand. So how do you create policies that, but for us, reality is we're impacted by climate change, and something has to give, because our children are suffering, we are suffering. We live in an ocean with one island. Some of our islands are submerged. So having to have these policies in relation to climate change really needs to have it at a basic, understandable language and text that all our people, including grassroots, even us politicians, can understand and action properly. And I think I better stop there and let others speak. Thank you, Christine.
No, thank you. There were some really excellent reflections. And when you were first speaking, it just really made me think of something that I've heard, in particular young girls say occasionally to me, which makes you very proud, which is, you can't be what you can't see, so thank you for being someone we can see. And I think you demonstrate that in spades, so thank you. How about you, Catherine?
Thank you, Kristin, and what a pleasure it is to be here. Happy Gender Day to everybody, and happy to engage in this conversation. And just listening to what you were saying made me think of so many other things that are happening internationally. And one thing that you mentioned was getting better participation of women in society. So one of the things that Canada has done, you asked for innovative things, was training for climate negotiators in developing countries. And we started doing this several years back because there clearly aren't enough women at the table. There aren't enough voices. So we've partnered now with the Institut de la Francophonie pour le Développement Durable, and we do. So in order to provide training and capacity building in developing countries so that women can then come to the table at COP and be able to negotiate on behalf of their country. This has been something we started a few years ago, and it's been quite successful in helping to empower women. And you mentioned language. Certainly for Canada as a bilingual country, for Francophones coming into this setting where they're negotiating language in English is particularly challenging. So for us, it's important to also, approach this from a linguistic perspective too, and help people to feel empowered that you're entitled to be in this space and understand what's going on and understand the nuance of the language. Not an insignificant thing, and we hear about that across the board, not just in terms of negotiations, but also in applying for climate finance. The forms, if mostly in English, and if you're not familiar, it's cumbersome to begin with, but yet alone having to do it in a different language. So I just wanted to pick up on that point. Lots more we could talk about, and there will be maybe more opportunity, but very pleased to hear about what Australia is doing in terms of advancing gender equality in your foreign policy, in your international assistance. We have a feminist international assistance policy in Canada where we, ensure to bring in gender empowerment, empowerment of women and girls at the heart of everything we do. 80% of our climate finance, for example, needs to have a gender equality lens applied to it, and so there's a lot we're trying to do there to increase the visibility and the importance. Thank you.
Yep. Wonderful. Thanks very much, Ambassador. We'll move now to Ambassador Rao Gupta. Over to you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, greetings for Gender Day to all of you, and I think that is perhaps the most significant thing we can all do, which is to break down the silos between climate change policies that seek to address those disasters, but also the ones that seek to advance gender equality. And we, from the US government perspective, have done just that, actually, in all of our policies, starting from our 2021 first ever national strategy for gender equity and equality, right down to this year, we launched the Women, Peace and Security strategy, which also has a pillar on climate change. So I think that is the most important thing to do. We are also proud to have released this year our first ever strategy to respond to climate change as it impacts women and girls. And that has important sort of bearing on everything that my office does at the Department of State, as well as interagency. I have, to really work, these policies have to not just delineate the impacts and how to respond to those, but also how to empower women and girls, and as others have said, to bring their voices to the table. I'm really pleased that a number of countries now are developing climate change gender action plans, the CCGAPs, which I think if you review those, and we had an opportunity to have a webinar, our embassies in San Jose and Lima actually hosted a webinar with several countries. I think 10 countries participated to discuss those gender action plans. And what was interesting to note were some of the approaches that were common that I think are good ways to move forward. One is to really provide marginalized communities a chance to have a voice in decision-making around those strategies. The second is to have women and girls who serve in leadership positions currently, but also those who seek to be actors in addressing climate change, share with us the barriers that they face in taking those leadership positions. I think that's important. And then the third, I would say, is adopting an intersectional approach, to acknowledge that there are many personal characteristics that create intersecting sort of axes of disadvantage, and to know how those play out in the context of both gender equality and climate action, I think is really important. So we are trying to put all of that into work through our strategies and enacting those strategies through the various diplomatic efforts that we are engaging in. And I think those are the lessons, I would say, that we have learned along the way.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Jock, if we move to you for a different perspective, not because of your gender, because you're European, and we haven't yet heard from a European on the panel. So over to you.
Thank you very much for being here as a male companion of the empowerment of women. Regarding, and I didn't get the memo. I got orange because
You're Dutch.
I'm not only Dutch, but the 16 days against gender violence are extremely important, and not only 16 days a year, but 365 days a year. And I was stationed in South Africa, and there you really see how important it is as well in the Netherlands. Regarding your question about gender transformative actions, there are two interconnected elements. And I very much agree with the US that one of them is taking an intersectional approach, because gender inequality is a major cause of conflict, violence, poverty worldwide. But it's only one dimension of social inequalities. And it stands in the way of collective, effective, and just climate action. So feminist climate action must take intersectionality as one of their starting points. The second element I like to stress is locally led. Women, indigenous groups, youths have proven not only to just be victims, but effective agents of change. If economically empowered, with access to land, finance, property, women will be empowered to adapt more effectively to climate change. And actually, we only have one duty, and that is amplifying their voices. We just have to mobilize the energy of the young, the wisdom of the indigenous people, the organizational capacities of poor women, the voices of women of color, the power of women with disabilities, and I could continue on and on and on. And what we need for that is obviously more finance made available to local women rights organizations and movements, because they are the principal agents of change. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jock. And our last panellist, Elena, how are you seeing things from the Asia-Pacific region?
Thank you so much. I think we've heard so much already from the rest of the panel, but I think Jock mentioned here, we need to mobilize all the different groups of women, but how do we actually do that? Do we just invite them to the table? Or do we structurally change how our societies are organized so that we don't even need to invite them anymore, but they're already sitting there? And for me, what's crucial for that is social protection and value and care for people and care for the planet as well. And I think we've seen some very good examples of governments in Asia Pacific doing this by making childcare services available for free for rural communities, or by increasing the educational requirements for people working in childcare, so that work is valued more. Or putting in place social protection mechanisms that are also linked to conservation work and really rewarding conservation work. And I think that's some really interesting mechanisms. And I think the other thing, I think we started this conversation on whole of community resilience, and I think for me, that's really about thinking who's most likely to be left behind. And I think everyone here mentioned intersectionality, and then that so often it's women who are also poor and who are also have a disability and who are facing all of this. And what's also crucial for them, I think, one is how the private sector is organized and what livelihood opportunities they have. And there's also some good examples in Asia Pacific where governments are really encouraging alternative business models that are focused on social impact and inclusion. But then the other part is also of like more at a macro, at a global level, where are we putting the money? Someone also mentioned putting the financing to the women's groups, and we're talking, of course, this whole week about loss and damage, etc., and how we can't mobilize that financing. But at the same time, there's financing available for what's the very opposite of whole of community resilience, which in my view is war and military spending. So if we have money for that, we also have money for initiatives that are fostering whole of community resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Why don't you hold on to the microphone, because I'll put some set questions to the group, but we'll start with you again, Elena, on these. My notes tell me you've been involved in something called the Catalyzing Women's Entrepreneurship Program. Can you give us some insights into what that program has found, where it's been successful or where it's faced some barriers in approaching or thinking about enabling environments to support women entrepreneurs to drive the green transition?
Thank you so much. So yeah, Catalyzing Women's Entrepreneurship program has been running for about 5 years with the very kind support of the Government of Canada, so thank you. And so far we've reached over 176,000 women entrepreneurs in Asia and the Pacific and mobilized over $89 million in additional funding for women entrepreneurs. And we've done this through a range of mechanisms, from policy and advocacy work to training programs for women entrepreneurs, through small grant windows for local women's rights organizations, but also by really looking at how does financing for women entrepreneurs work and how can we shift power dynamics in that. So that's been done through supporting fintech solutions that really get money from urban investors to rural farmers at windows as small as like $20 loans or even less. As well as then we've really helped scale up gender bonds in Asia Pacific. We've seen several rounds of oversubscribed women's livelihood bonds in Asia Pacific that also I know the Australian government has been a big backer of. Then we've also helped establish Asia Pacific's first pure gender lens investing fund. And right now we're really also scaling this up through various competitions, support programs for the very grassroots as well as startups. What we found on the enabling environment is, I think if you ask any entrepreneur globally, what are your issues? You'll hear 4 answers. One is the policy environment is terrible and it's too cumbersome, it's too difficult, it's taking too much time. The second is we don't have access to the right people or the right skills and expertise and networks. The third is we need access to customers and to markets domestically and internationally. And the number one pain point for all entrepreneurs I've ever spoken to is we need access to funding. We need access to finance. And that's even worse for women entrepreneurs who are getting about 2% of, for example, venture capital funding globally. Then for women, of course, we all know this, in addition to these standard entrepreneurship challenges, is that they're also facing the care burden. They're also facing gender-based violence. They're also facing social norms that are not supportive, which then locks them also in the informal sector, in sectors that are lower paid, etc. So addressing this with a climate lens is, I think there's some really good examples. Again, I already mentioned this in terms of governments can put in place incentives for the private sector to go more green, more gender responsive, and put in place better processes. Governments are also providing learning opportunities for women in STEM, women in climate-focused thematics. What else did I have? Governments are also doing more in terms of getting women access to markets, including by integrating climate and gender dimensions in public procurement mechanisms and gender and climate responsive export promotion. And then the last point, really, again, on the financing, there's so much has been happening in Asia Pacific where when we started 5 years ago, talking about gender lens investing was, what are you talking about? Whereas now, when we're talking about gender lens investing, everyone's like, yeah, obviously, like, it's a thing. I mean, obviously, we still need to bring more people on board. We need more money to go into gender lens investing. But it's a mainstream thing now. And we organized earlier this year a feminist finance forum, which 5 years ago, if we had had a feminist finance forum, people would have said, what are you doing? Whereas now is, yeah, still a couple of raised eyebrows, but pretty mainstream. So I think there's been a big change there. Thank you.
And if they go along, they might walk out thinking, wow, those are amazing bankable ideas that they were discussing.
Oh, so, absolutely. Yeah. We had a few people arrive being like, I'm not a feminist. And walking out being like, oh, I'm a feminist.
Because there's some money to be made in that. All right, thank you. There were some great examples. Jock, we've talked a little already on the panel about embedding gender objectives in foreign policy, and I know the Dutch government does that as well. Have you got any examples, or where do you see the opportunities in developing countries to embed gender-responsive climate actions?
Yeah, there are a lot, and actually it's not only about in climate action, but in our whole foreign policy. We copied it from front runners like Canada to have a feminist policy. What I'm actually most proud of, what we fund as the Netherlands, is our SDG 5 fund. which contains more than 500 million euros of financial support to gender equality, women's rights, and sexual and reproductive health to Southern partners over the years 21-25. And it's the whole basis of this is trying to empower those groups, because empowering is what is most important. And what we do in our programming is having to look at climate budgeting. We have to do checks before we approve any program. And it has to be clear which part of the budget will go to gender. And we, for example, and it's maybe a bit of a tick of the box, but next to the gender budgeting, there should obviously be a gender analysis, and it should only not be an analysis up front. But what we're struggling most with is having the KPIs to later on report on that all the good intentions you had based on that analysis become true. And that's actually the part that we are struggling. But so we have a system of continuous evaluating it and hoping to learn. And I think we have to learn on grabbing those results after the projects. There we have to improve.
Well, can I acknowledge that admitting where you're not yet doing well and keeping a watch on it and trying different ways is exactly how we'll succeed. So I think that's a really good approach. So thank you. I will ask the next question to Ambassador Rao Gupta. Colleagues, with my apologies, I will then have to leave the stage, and my wonderful colleague Peter Ollison will come up to continue the conversation towards the end of the side event. I do feel I need to tell you why I'm leaving. It's because I'm going to a critical minerals side event. Critical minerals don't grip me like this sort of discussion does, but if I don't, there may be no gender balance on the panel. So please forgive me for my early departure from this. But thank you to panellists. It's been wonderful, and Peter will keep the conversation going. But Ambassador Rao Gupta, you personally have a very impressive history of advocating for women's rights, and certainly I would remark that the US government as a whole over many decades has as well. And there's a particular new announcement which the US government has made just recently called Women in the Sustainable Economy. My brief reading of it, it's quite impressive, and the momentum that your government is seeking to build around it for other partner companies and governments to join is very impressive. So how does this WISE initiative and things like it drive climate leadership for women and girls in your own country and more broadly?
Thank you for that question, and you're absolutely right that women's leadership, amplifying women's and girls' voices in climate action is actually an integral part of all of our 4 major gender strategies that have integrated action to the climate crisis within them. The WISE initiative that the ambassador mentioned is something that's going to be announced. It's the Women in Sustainable Economies initiative. It's a public-private partnership that will be announced and described in greater detail in terms of the full suite of deliverables at the 11 o'clock special event that's happening in the US Center today. So I invite you all to attend, to listen to that. I don't want to steal the thunder and talk about it here, but I do want to highlight one other initiative that I feel very excited about that's called Innovation Station that my office runs together with other interagency partners. It's, to me, a perfect example of translating policy into action, because one of the lines of effort in our strategy on gender and climate is actually to lift women's voices and work into the public sphere. And this particular initiative takes women innovators, young women and girls who are innovators, who are developing solutions to climate change, and amplifies their innovations, helps them build networks across countries globally, helps them share best practices with each other, and develop collaborations. And I have to say that having participated in some of their discussions, to hear them talk with excitement about their particular innovations and then allow them to share that in a way that they can be scaled up, is very exciting. We have developed podcasts, virtual events, newsletters to try and amplify those solutions. What the young women talk about a lot is how that kind of interaction allows them to build relationships and collaborations, which I think is what they need the most in order to scale up their efforts. I just wanted to share some examples of those innovations. They have ways to improve the sustainability of marine tourism. They have mobile device applications to address food supply challenges and create economic opportunities for local women. They have developed modular, sustainable agricultural solutions. They've created new markets for textile scraps. So a whole range of different kinds of issues to advance sustainability, tackle climate change, and reverse environmental degradation. And as of October this year, the Innovation Station has actually engaged audiences in 49 US states and 158 countries. It has exposed them to those solutions to a much, much wider audience and has helped develop about 1,000 collaborative relationships. And I should say, since this is an Australia event, that one of my first meetings when I was confirmed as ambassador was the US-Australia Strategic Dialogue. And the Innovation Station was one of the key themes of that discussion. So I'm excited to be here again today to share that with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ambassador Gupta. That is really exciting, and something that my team works a lot on is in the innovation and collaborative landscape. So quite interested to maybe think about how we take that and bring that into that bigger community. Ambassador Stewart, so I was wondering if you could please tell us a bit more about Canada's Feminist International Assistance Program that puts gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls at the heart of your international assistance efforts. Could you talk a bit more about that approach?
Thank you, and I'm glad we already had the example of the Women Entrepreneurship Program that Canada is very proud to have been supporting in terms of just working to greater empower women and girls in developing countries. Happy to hear about these examples here today. And this is an area where we continue to across many different fronts bring women closer to economic benefits, but also health benefits. So another project that we could talk about is clean cook stoves. And women are the they have primary responsibility for feeding their families, and they are often the ones at the front line having to go out and draw water and find wood to be able to cook meals. And because of climate change, they're having to go further and further afield to collect the wood to bring home to make the meal, which exposes them to danger, a lot more danger, and they end up traveling huge distances to have to bring the wood back to be able to prepare the food. And then when you're in the house, having the smoke from burning of the wood is terrible for the respiratory health and health outcomes. So by investing in clean cook stoves, which is something that we've done, that has improved the quality of life, the health standards, and enabled women to get out of the house and pursue a living as well, and pursue education. And it frees up more time to be able to be more empowered and to venture into entrepreneurship and so on. So that's just one example of what we've been able to do under our Feminist International Assistance Program, in addition to many other things.
Thank you, Catherine. So my final question then is to you, Minister. Earlier this year at the Pacific Islands Forum at the Women's Leaders Meeting, you said there was a need to highlight inclusivity to empower women and girls to enable the marginalised people through meaningful participation in all aspects of life, including engagement in climate change action, decision-making and leadership. So in your role as the Pacific political champion for gender and social inclusion, how do you promote active, meaningful participation of women and girls in the Pacific to engage on climate action?
Thank you. That was a long one. And absolutely, I spoke earlier on about how we need to to have a language that is understood by everyone. There's a lot of things, a lot of programs in the Pacific that we have engaged, we have established, as I said, about the Leaders' Declaration on Gender. There's a lot of programs that we have created. But one of the things that, and I really appreciate also that our male panelists, I love your orange, because I know orange is the color of money in Chinese somewhere. So I'm sure that we're going to appreciate the fact that you'll be helping us women in the Pacific from your organization. Thank you for that. But anyway, when we talk also about sustainability and how do we empower people, how do you live in the Pacific, I almost burst out of my skin when I listen to what you all have to say, because this is reality for us. We live this every day. So empowering our own people, having a language that is understood. And when I talk about having women in decision-making roles, you know, we have innovators in Niue. As long as short as September, we launched a program in New York called Ocean Conservation Commitments. This is one of the a brainchild of homegrown, innovative idea from our women to invest as such in our conservation space, in our EEZ. We all know living in the ocean in the Pacific is very, very difficult. But finding funds to help us in our own programs or our own communities is very difficult. So coming up with this financial mechanism to try to help us sustain and try to give potential and opportunities to our young women, our people, is very important. So this is a brainchild of a couple of women and an honorary woman. I hope he's not watching. But you know, just trying to find ways that we can empower our own communities, women and girls. But as I've always said, gender is not just about women and girls. The language that you use, I'm a very traditional old lady. When you talk about feminists, it's a great text and language. In our culture as Polynesian people, you know, our hierarchy has always been the male figure. So I think this is a language that we really also need to understand, because you're doing tremendous work, and I hope it filters into the Pacific so we are also able to benefit. But yeah, there's really a lot that needs to be said. I think an hour or so at a conversation like this is not long enough for our advocacy work, and I hope that next year's COP, Australia will allow us a whole day of gender to share our stories, because it's important. I mean, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of records all out there. For years we've produced all of these from the Pacific, but we still haven't really moved forward as such. So when I talk about language and text, it's important to create basic programs. When we have our development partners come, you need to have a individual nations approach rather than a regional approach, because some small countries like ours, we basically we don't have the capacity to undertake all these programs. So there's a lot that I have to say, but I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I have a final question for the panel, and it's open for who wants to kick us off. But it's broadly about how do we promote the gender just transition towards a net zero future, and what can we all here be helping to do on this agenda? Elena, I might start down with you.
Really give women what they need to be the leaders of this change, whether it's in conservation, whether it's at the negotiations, or whether it's as women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, for me, representation is key. I'm very honored to be here in such a diverse panel, but we still see at this COP a lot of manuals instead of panels, and actually we're discussing within our ministry just to refuse to participate in them. If they only have men sitting there, we would just say, no, we won't go. That's one thing, and representation is important. For example, also in the Netherlands, where we consider ourselves to be progressive in politics, there are much less women active than men. And I used to be a member of parliament, and I gave up my seat to allow my wife to campaign successfully for that seat.
Wow.
And and not only to empower women, because she is the better politician of the two of us. I said that in Parliament as well in my farewell speech, and that was the same laughter. But it's good to laugh, but it's a real serious issue to get that representation right. So I thank the Canadian government and other governments for supporting women to participate and not only be a token, but having meaningful participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say it's representation leadership for certain, but it's also partnerships. I do think that no one country, no one actor, no one sector can do this alone. And we all need to come together and think of ways in which we can complement each other's efforts to move this agenda along faster than we are right now, because it cannot wait, as we know well. I just want to say, meanwhile, I think we should all celebrate today. The fact that we succeeded in getting Agenda Day in the COP is a big deal. It's a big deal. So yes, it's only one day. I wish we had it throughout. But I will say, let's just make it known throughout as we're walking around today that today is our day.
I can't help but, when listening to Jock to talk about when Prime Minister Trudeau was first elected in 2015, and he made half of his cabinet women, and a journalist asked him, you know, what's with the half cabinet being women? And he said, it's 2015. And so, like, we've talked about just mainstreaming this, and I think these bold things need to happen so that this is very mainstreamed. In terms of the energy transition and the just transition future, we've noticed that a lot of women are not in the skilled workforce that will take us into a cleaner future. And so one of the things Canada launched was an Equal by 30 campaign to sort of ensure that as we are working on the clean energy transition, we are mindful of the need to ensure women have the skills to be able to successfully integrate into that future and be part of it again. So it's mainstream.
Thank you. To me, I think that exposure is a huge area that we are trying to encourage in new way, especially with our young people. The faster you expose our young minds to our programs or our where we are and our developments for the future, exposing our young ones. I know in New Way we include that in part of the curriculum at an early age. There's a big program that we have from years 5 to year 10 on climate change and the impacts. And I think being a traditional and cultural region, we're so huge on tradition that we don't generally move further than what we have been brought up in. So having to, I guess, to transition from our culture and our beliefs from previously to now is a huge thing. But when we talk about transitioning here at COP, there's a lot that we see and we hear at COP, especially in regards to fossil fuel energy, and we believe that this is something that needs to have a lot more conversation for us to understand, because of course that's going to impact us as well. You know, a lot of what we have as our resources, we rely heavily on some of these mechanisms. So it's having us understand where we're going and letting us embrace, but exposing our young ones is one of the critical areas that we need to encourage in the Pacific, so we have a better understanding of what is happening out there at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you everyone for this very inspiring panel. I've learnt a lot out of everybody here today. I've jotted down a few of the keywords and things that we've discussed, but I guess we've touched mostly about, it's about empowerment. It's not just about providing skills or to be at the table, but it's to be empowered to move forward in this space. It's about representation. And the climate negotiator training is a really fantastic movement. And a few years ago when I first started, I went through one of the women negotiator trainings, and it just makes all the difference. We talked about mainstreaming, that this is no longer, a niche issue. We have a whole day here in the UAE, which is fantastic. Having mainstream conversations with gender lens on financing and innovation is just amazing. It's about putting women in decision-making positions, and that's where change is going to happen. It's also about individual solutions. There's lots of pathways that we have, common opportunities we have, and we can partner together, but also being place-specific, context-specific. It's about capacity building, but it's about that intersectional challenge. And finally, it's about the language we choose to use as well, and that by having the right language to create simple policy, basic understanding for everyone, not just for women, that's how we're going to be able to influence change in our communities. So thank you everyone for being here today, and thanks for letting me step in at the last minute.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.